This conference will now be recorded.
Good evening and welcome to the Alpena City Council meeting of July 17th, 2023. Call the order, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Mitchell.
Here.
Councilmember Nowak.
Here.
Councilmember Walczak.
Here.
And Mayor Waligora.
Here. Please rise for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, approval of the minutes from regular session of July 3rd, 2023. Any issues, changes?
You're gonna go back up and approve
Would I skip something?
Yeah.
Yeah, we should probably approve the agenda. We move on. Sorry. I'll entertain a motion to do so.
So moved. Second.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell.
Yes.
Councilmember Nowak.
Yes.
Councilmember Walczak.
Yes.
And Mayor Waligora.
Aye. Any proposed modifications to said agenda?
No, sir.
I'll check things off in order this time. Okay. Should I recover the minutes or is that okay? All right, citizens appearing before council on agenda and non-agenda items are allowed 5 minutes each to address your concerns. This is the only time during tonight's meeting that citizens are allowed to address council. If you'd like to do so and you are in the room, please come to the podium and state your name and address to our clerk for her records.
My name is Diane Bauer and I live on Bingham Street here in Alpena, Michigan. A community health advocate, as I shared with Matt and many other leaders in my government class this past year. You need some ADA work. Not only from a bias standpoint explicitly, some words that Mr. Gilmet shared with me some months ago still ring in my head that really the ADA doesn't matter downtown. 36 inches doesn't matter. It does for people in wheelchairs, for people in quad chairs, for people in strollers. The small tent is excluding people in wheelchairs this year. Yeah. So I'm hoping that the CIP, as I understand it, I couldn't find a copy, does have some sort of place in there to have a consultant for ADA. You need it. You can't even get across State Street if you're in a wheelchair. There's not one crosswalk. So as Mr. Murdoch shares the report and you hear that the growing population in Alpena, Michigan is aging people, you can know that many of them use mobility devices. Thank you for listening.
Good, Diane. Anyone else live in the room? Virtual, sir? Thank you. Okay, tonight's consent agenda, excuse me, it's a bit long, so bear with me, please. A is bills to be allowed in the amount of $413,700.31 and authorize Mayor Waligora and Clerk Soik to sign. B is the approval of resolution number 2023-12, which accepts the terms of the Land and Water Conservation Fund Development Project Agreement with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources and authorize the City Manager Rachel Smolinski to sign. C is the approval of the Michigan Boating Pumpout Grant Program Project Agreement with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources and authorize City Manager Rachel Smolinski to sign. D is cast the following votes to the Michigan Municipal League's Workers' Compensation Fund Board of Trustees. Christine Burns, appointee, manager of the Village of Spring Lake. Juan Ganum, appointee, manager of the City of Bridgman. Kevin Klynstra, appointee, mayor of the City of Zeeland. Devin Olson, incumbent, manager of the City of Munising. Adam Smith, incumbent, manager, municipal executive of the City of Grand Ledge. And David Tossava, incumbent, mayor of the City of Hastings.
I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
Councilmember Mitchell.
Yes.
Councilmember Nowak.
Yes.
Councilmember Walczak.
Yes.
Mayor Waligora.
Aye.
And Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you. Next up, we have presentations. The first one is the Mishikua Shoreline Restoration Project, and Amy Novakuski and Hanan Yazdi from here in Pines are here.
Thank you and good evening. So I'm Amy Novakuski, Coastal Project Manager at Huron Pines, right here in Alpena. And here with me today is Hanan Yazdi. She's our Huron Pines AmeriCorps Water Program Technician who is here serving with us as a volunteer this service year. So today's presentation will cover the Mishikuis Dune Restoration or Shoreline Restoration Project and how that project came to be. But first, I'll give a brief introduction about Huron Pines, who we are, and the types of projects that we work on. So we're an environmental nonprofit organization, and we're celebrating our 50th year as an organization this year. And we focus on natural resource protection and restoration. And as you can see on this map here, we work all across Northeast Michigan. And we have 2 offices, one in Alpena and one in Gaylord. So the next slide shows our 3 program areas. So we strive to reach our conservation goals by connecting our region's water, land, and people, and those are our 3 programs. So we partner with organizations and municipalities and community members to implement a wide variety of projects, including river restoration, such as this picture in the top left. We replaced an undersized culvert with a new timber bridge. We do water quality improvements such as stormwater management and green infrastructure installation. We also have a land stewardship program where we do invasive species management, such as the work occurring this year at the Alpena Wildlife Sanctuary. And we do land protection, such as the new North Point Nature Preserve. And today we're going to focus on the Mishikuis project and how that came to be. But in the future, Huron Pines will present at future City Council meetings where we will inform you about some other projects such as Forests to Faucets, which is a project that's going to link healthy forests to clean drinking water, as well as the Thunder Bay River Watershed Management Plan. And all of these programs fit into the Lake Huron Forever initiative. So the next slide shows how this is a project or an initiative that was developed with partners both in the US and in Canada. And it's really looking to advance water quality protection and engage communities throughout the Lake Huron Basin. And as you know, this year we're working toward a joint pledge between the City of Alpena, the Alpena Township, and the Alpena County, which is really exciting to see our community here committing to protecting Lake Huron forever. So the first project, next slide please, where the Mishikuis project was derived from was the Alpena Stormwater Assessment. And this was really, it looked at Alpena's source water protection plan and it delineated drainage zones throughout the city. And because all of Alpena's stormwater goes untreated directly into Lake Huron and the Thunder Bay River, the assessment estimates the volume of water and estimates the pollutant loading of each zone, and then it recommends best management practices that could have the biggest impact on water quality for each zone. And this project can really guide some ideal locations in the city where green infrastructure could be implemented in the future. So that led us to our next project, which was the Alpena Green Infrastructure Visioning, and that project happened last October. It was a partnership between the City of Alpena, Huron Pines, and the engineering firm Drummond Carpenter. And the idea was really to build awareness on green infrastructure and visualize potential locations within the city where green infrastructure options could be implemented. So with the city's guidance and their recommendations, we identified several locations in the city and we developed conceptual designs or artistic renderings for 8 different locations. And after we developed designs, we gathered community feedback by hosting an in-person meeting where people learned about green infrastructure and how it works. And then people gave feedback and provided comments for each of the 8 designs. We also developed an online story map and community survey to gather feedback from people who couldn't attend the in-person meeting. So the next slide shows a chart at the bottom where each of the 8 sites were ranked by the community's feedback. And we can see, well, maybe it's hard for you to see, but the third project down from the top of the table is the Mischikiwis Shoreline Restoration Project. So that was the one that community members ranked as their top pick. And there were also some common themes with the community feedback, including accessibility for wheelchairs and walkers, especially that shoreline access. There was some concern about maintenance. Some designs could have too much maintenance, so really selecting designs that have a few number of plants or easy to care for plants to make maintenance easy is really key. There was a reoccurring theme that people really like plants and they want to see more flowers and plants and trees throughout the community. And it was really clear that residents really care about water and they want to keep it clean for drinking water, recreation, as well as just making this a beautiful place to live. So next, I'll go through a couple of examples. I won't go through all 8, but really the project wanted to look at some diversity of sites where green infrastructure could be put in different locations across the city. So we looked at parking lots, alleys, city parks, and then of course Mischikiwis, and I'll get there in a moment. So this is an example of the River Street parking lot, which is a really large lot that I believe the city plans to renovate sometime in the near future. So this could be an opportunity. If the parking lot was redone, it could be resloped to capture and filter the stormwater in that bioswale on the right side of the picture, and plant it with native plants that are easy to maintain. This type of project would reduce flooding and also improve water quality before it enters Lake Huron, or actually here it would enter the Thunder Bay River. So the next slide shows Center Alley. And as you all know, this is a really popular location in the city. So this design, our engineers use some movable planter boxes. So the planter boxes can act kind of like a raised rain garden to capture and filter rainwater and redirect it into the existing stormwater system. And then also on the far right is a bioswale, similar to the parking lot example that I just showed. And it would capture and filter any runoff coming from the parking lot nearby.
The Defense Ministry is preparing adequate proposal. Ukraine did not directly confirm or deny responsibility for the attack.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Good. I'm going to just keep on going. And the next slide, I'll let Hanan take over.
Thank you, Amy. So yeah, just going over a couple more examples that came out of that community visioning process. The second highest ranked site was Bayview Park. And the proposed idea here is to take an area that's a natural low area on the lawn and currently experiences a lot of seasonal water pooling and is very wet and difficult to maintain, and installing a pollinator garden there. So this would kind of alleviate some of those maintenance needs. Serve as like a beautifying piece to the park. We really focus on at Huron Pines on planting native plants, which are easier to maintain and are good habitat for wildlife and pollinators. And this would also serve as a stormwater capture and filter stormwater runoff before it enters Lake Huron. Next slide, please. And then, of course, the highest ranked site was the Mischikiwis Beach restoration project. The proposed idea here is to restore and strengthen the natural dune system by installing temporary wood slat fencing. So this would allow for natural sand deposition and accumulation, and then to later plant native grasses and native plants along that dune shoreline so that it would stabilize the dunes and prevent further erosion. And so this would alleviate, again, some maintenance needs. Having the native plants there would improve wildlife habitat and pollinator habitat. And we also plan, as part of this project, it would be, part of it would be installing those ADA accessible mats to improve access to the shoreline. Next slide, please. So yeah, so Amy mentioned that I'm a Huron Pines AmeriCorps member. Should we implement any of these projects, the bulk of the work would be done by Huron Pines AmeriCorps members from across the state. If you're not familiar with the program, it's a service program that places individuals with conservation organizations across the state for a 10-month term. And people are placed with conservation nonprofits, with the DNR, with the Forest Service, and members during their 10-month term work on a wide range of projects, everything from invasive species management to wildlife surveying, to environmental education. And so this year we have 23 members. On the next slide, we have this lovely map that our program coordinator made that really shows where every single person is placed and how it's really truly a statewide program. A key piece of our service is that we're really encouraged to travel to other individuals' host sites across the state and assist with projects in those other host sites. And so this increases the capacity of those host sites to implement bigger projects because there's more hands on the ground. And it also serves as an educational opportunity for us as members to experience working on different ecosystems and experiencing different types of natural resources work. So this summer, 15 members will be traveling to Alpena from August 16th to the 18th from all across the state to participate in a 3-day coastal resiliency training and restoration work few days. So this, having all the members here, would be an opportunity to begin restoration on Mishkewis Beach, specifically to install that temporary sand fencing and pull some weeds and kind of prepare the groundwork for later plantings for those native grasses, perhaps in the fall. So yeah, while they're here, so that's one of the projects that they could work on while they're here. We have some other ideas for coastal resiliency and shoreline restoration work that the members will be involved in while they're here for those 3 days. We did also want to open it up that if there are other ideas that you have for spots around the city that could kind of fit into these 3 days, this is a unique opportunity where you have 15 very eager, capable individuals here ready to work on any projects. So to please let us know, and kind of just like looking in the future. So this, if we started this restoration work in the summer, it would mainly be those the wood flat fencing and pulling weeds, and then doing those native plantings later in the fall. And perhaps in future years, we've been in discussions with the city to assist with restoring the volleyball courts that are around that beach. So yeah, kind of looking to the future. And with that, I think we'll open it up to questions.
Yeah, I don't have any specific questions. Amy did indicate that you'll just work with the city manager, and then if something needs to be come back to us for like a final approval. This will be just filed and receipt and filed as a prison.
Yeah, and there would likely be a request that would come to the next council.
Okay. Any questions or concerns before then? I wouldn't want you to come back if. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you both. I'll entertain a motion to receive and file.
So moved. Second.
Councilmember Nowak,
Yes.
Councilmember Walchuk,
Yes.
Mayor Waligora,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Next up is the housing needs assessment, and Kelly Murdoch from Community Research Services is here to present that.
Hello, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. And first of all, this is a project that's been going on for a few months, and I wanted to thank Mike and his organization and Rachel as well. They were really, really helpful in helping me collect information, talk to people, conduct interviews, and really get to some key questions and answers about the housing assessment. So do I have control here or nope? Okay. Let's go next slide then. So housing assessment is a combination of demographic data, individual collection of market information at the local level, and a series of interviews of key housing leaders as far as what things they're experiencing in terms of finding housing for individuals, need for housing for employees, so on and so forth. So all that information is collected and analyzed, and that's what goes into the assessment. You have the PowerPoint in front of you, and we'll go through that very quickly. The council people also have the executive summary, which is quite a beefy executive summary, if I must say. It's got all the key findings of the report in there. And if you really have insomnia or have trouble sleeping, full report is also available, and suggest you take a look at that as well. But again, appreciate your assistance on all this, and let's just go through this real quick, and if we have any time left, I'd be happy to entertain any questions. So we want to divide the Alpena area into what we call a primary market area that represents where the majority of housing opportunities may reside. And for this analysis, that includes Alpena City, the township, and Sanborn Township. And we separated that into one market area. We analyzed the balance of the county as well, and we termed that rural Alpena, and that's described within the analysis as well. Next slide, please. Primary findings, and this is not unique to Alpena, it's not unique to Northern Michigan. There's just a lack of housing opportunities for people to take advantage of. You have a stable to increasing economy. You have opportunities for development, opportunities to bring more people into the community as permanent residents, and they're having real difficulty finding a permanent housing alternative. And the problem with that is it diminishes your community's assets, and you have wonderful assets here in Alpena. I live in Clinton County, and Clinton County doesn't have these kind of things. We don't have the shoreline. We don't have the recreational opportunities. Where I live, the best thing is that we're close to something. You know, you guys have all these other assets that people can really take advantage of. And in this day and age, when people are not tied to an office or a specific location, people can work from home. They're now choosing where they can live much more than they used to in the past. So taking advantage of these community assets are increasingly important, and I hope that helps to spur some development activity in the future. But like I said, lack of housing that's available, particularly for sale, it inhibits household creation. It ultimately is going to impact your school district, your tax base, and your economic base as well. Next slide, please. This is a few examples from the study. This is a measure of annual migration based on the American Community Survey. And what you can take away from this is that Alpena is holding its own in terms of competing with other communities across northern Michigan and the state of Michigan as a whole. The largest one single loss of population on an annual basis was to the Port Huron area, and I'm sure that was specific to a specific employer or something like that. And you'll notice the biggest loss is to other parts of the United States, and that's not unique to Alpena. The state of Michigan and much of the Midwest is dealing with those kind of issues as well. So, but the point of this slide is to demonstrate that Alpena is holding its own in terms of migration patterns and should do so over the next few years as well. Next slide, please. This is a measure of changes based on age groups. And as you can see, what is classic for communities such as Alpena and much of Michigan is a significant increase in the number of seniors age 65 and older, and that's certainly illustrated in this chart here. And there's also a surprising degree of loss in terms of that older adult non-senior population, age 45 to 64. But the key thing that I thought was interesting here is that most communities are really struggling with a loss of population in the young adult segment, age 20 to 44. Alpena is doing pretty good with that. That trend right there is pretty stable, and it's a reflection, I think, of the community's diversity from an economic standpoint, the ability to keep younger adults in the community as compared to other communities that are really struggling with that. I think that's a real positive indication of what's going on here in Alpena right now. Last thing I'm going to say on that, the children, young adult, less than age 20, that is of concern as well, because we want to make sure our school districts are maintaining levels, and obviously funding is based on a per pupil basis. So that is of concern, but again, that's not anything that's certainly unique to Alpena. Next slide, please. This is an indication of typical household size. This is average size for a household. just to let you know, statewide average is about 2.45 persons. That's slowly declining over the past few decades as our state and much of our nation ages in place. We're not having as many children either. And you can see the city of Alpena, based on a concentration of seniors and younger adults that don't have children, that's a very low average household size. Rural Alpena is probably the most, for lack of a better word, family friendly in terms of that statistics. But it's probably not going to change in the near future. These types of demographic trends take a while to turn around. Next slide, please. And this is just a slide I want to throw in real quick. This is fertility rates for Michigan and the United States. We don't have utility rates for individual counties, unfortunately, but if we were to do that, I would suspect Alpena would be like many northern Michigan counties and into that lower range below the 2.0 replacement level. So what we're looking at is a community needs to have a fertility rate of 2.0 or 2.1 in order to maintain a stable degree of population. And as you can see, most parts of the nation, as well as state of Michigan, is struggling with that. In fact, there's probably only one or two states that are above that line. I'm sure one of them is Utah. I believe Texas is the other one in terms of replacement rate, fertility rate being above that 2.0, 2.01 level. So as a result, we're more and more dependent on migration and commuting and people coming into our communities and either being a temporary employer or employee or a permanent resident in order to have specific growth levels that are a positive reflection on the community. Next slide, please. And one more indication of this. This is place of work, commuting patterns. We just covered migration. Now we're talking about commuting patterns. Alpena is a very localized economic market, if you will. A lot of people that are residing in the Alpena area work in the Alpena area. There's not a lot of migration to other parts of northern Michigan as compared to, say, Gaylord or certainly Traverse City. In fact, I believe the Gaylord statistic for this is probably around 80% as compared to 91% here. So it's a very localized population in terms of employment. People stay here, they work here. There's not a lot of migration or movership out of that from that standpoint. Actually, there's one more slide on this. This is daytime population that reflects commuting history, and we've got that from the American Community Survey from the Census Bureau. The city's population is the red, and then the daytime population on average is in the blue. And as you can see, obviously Alpena brings in people every day to work, to shop, to do this, that, or the other thing, and that's a great thing. So that daytime population is around 150% of the overall population. Again, a good thing. However, if you look at other communities that you're competing with in northern Michigan, such as Gaylord, Traverse City, they have levels that are probably around 200% or 250% in terms of daytime population they're bringing in. Part of that is simply they're much more apt or able or suited to have commuters come in as compared to Alpena. Alpena, unfortunately, is a little more isolated. Most population centers that are proximate to Alpena are much more distant than, say, Gaylord or Traverse City. So this is a positive statistic. I don't mean to belittle it or put it down at all, but the communities you're really competing with, the Gaylords, the Traverse Cities, other parts of northern Michigan, they're doing a little better on that in terms of daytime population, bringing people in. But the trend is stable. That's a good thing. Next slide, please. One more thing on employment, at-place population. This reflects the number of jobs that exist within a community, not necessarily how many employed persons reside within the community. And you can see the breakdown. Public sector is blue, Local government is red, and that includes school district. And then the tiny slips on the top are federal and state. So you can see the impact in 2020 of the pandemic, but I think that recovery is well on its way and has already taken place. But it's a fairly stable trend from that standpoint. And then again, it also reflects also the commuting stuff I talked about earlier. A very localized population that is employed here, which is good, but not a lot of participation from outside of, say, Alpena County as compared to other parts of northern Michigan. Next slide. This is an infographic I use a lot in my studies just to provide some key information. You can see from the city standpoint, median age estimated at this time nearly 44 years. That's a little older than most areas of Michigan, but it's similar to other parts of northern Michigan. Certainly not unexpected. Your poverty rate is around 19.6%, and that's statistics probably 2 or 3 years old. Statewide and national average is around 13%. But for a city, you have a concentration of affordable housing, subsidized housing, other resources like that. That type of concentration is not unexpected. Education completion is pretty typical. Average household size, again, relatively smaller as compared to the statewide average. Next slide. And then just a brief talk about some of the impediments to a strong housing market and the ability to create more housing opportunities. Declining family size, increasing senior population. We certainly want seniors in our community. They're a very stabilizing factor in terms of certain economic and social characteristics, but they don't add to the school district from a child standpoint. And again, they are not as broadly impactful as, say, a family would be in terms of purchases or other types of activity like that. Couple that with the insufficient number of homes that are available for sale. And I wish I had that graphic with me, but over the past decade, there's been a total lack of housing development activity, not only here in Alpena County, but in most parts of Michigan as well. Some of that goes back to the Great Recession we had in 08 and then the subsequent housing crash. A lot of development activity simply shut down or relocated to other parts of the country. So we didn't have the number of construction builders, developers to address that kind of issue in terms of housing activity. And I think we've, as a state, have really dealt with that ever since. If you take apart when specific homes were constructed over the last 10 years, only 2 or 3% of the current housing stock has been constructed over the past 10 years. And it's really brought more emphasis, obviously, on rehabilitation, which is a good thing, but we simply need more housing activity to fulfill the demand potential that Alpena has, as well as other communities. And then migration shifts. Again, Alpena is what it is. It doesn't have the volume of migration or commuting, but you're certainly competitive with other parts of northern Michigan from an overall economic activity. So those are kind of impediments to housing development. And secondly, a mismatch in terms of the housing stock that's available. What type of development activity has gone on recently is certainly focused on higher end and vacation homes, because simply that's where developers, construction firms can make a guaranteed return. We simply don't have the economic incentives, whether it's from a private or a public source, to do much entry-level housing, workforce housing, opportunities for people that have moderate incomes and want to become part of the community. Those opportunities are decreasing every year. And then if you relate that to apartment demand, I see an increasing demand for market rate units, and affordable unit demand is being addressed by many ways, but that's also there, but not as prominent as the market rate demand. And that was one of the findings pointed out in the report. Lastly, this is some of the key recommendations. There's a full set of recommendations in a matrix in your executive summary, and I encourage you to look at that. And if you have any questions on that, I'll be happy to respond to that. But these are the key findings right here. Encourage new housing, homeownership opportunities for moderate and higher income individuals, targeting that 175 to 275,000 range in terms of price points. Additional market rate rental housing for not only salespeople, but also for moderate to higher income individuals to just relocate in the community, establish a threshold, and be a part of your community rather than commute more than an hour each day from, say, Gaylord or even Mount Pleasant for some reasons. Please continue efforts to encourage rehabilitation of aging housing stock. I was telling my wife when we came up here, we've stayed for a couple days. Alpena is one of the few communities that, at least in my opinion, doesn't really have a strong problem in terms of housing deficiencies, blight, and those kind of issues. And you may feel differently, but and from my perspective, looking at other communities across the state, you're in a very, very good position to build on the value that you have in your housing stock. And I encourage you all to do that. And lastly, I was tasked to also look at homelessness within Alpena County. Homelessness does exist. It exists for people that have difficulties from drug abuse. It has issues regarding mental health, and to a lesser degree, and actually a relatively small percentage, it has something to do with economic activity. So you have organizations that are working here in your community and helping alleviate those issues, and I certainly encourage them to continue their efforts. So, but homelessness, like many parts of Michigan, does exist here in Alpena. Now, this last slide, I was tasked by the Housing Task Force to provide specific recommendations, and this is what I kind of recommended to them as an organization. And at each level, it represents a different degree of activity, if you will. The first one, actively promote residential activity within the area. And that's basically, are you a cheerleader? Yes, let's be a cheerleader. Let's let people know we have an issue. Second one, encourage public sector and private sector efforts toward housing development activity. That's a little more advocacy, okay? That's getting involved and saying, hey, we have an issue, we want you to help with this. Third level, create public-private entities that actively promote housing development. That's being a partner with other entities that can actually do this kind of work. And then the last level, form development partnerships that directly construct or finance housing activities. That is, I'm in 100%. I am an active developer. I am trying to make a change in the community based on what they see as a housing committee. So I have worked with organizations at all four of those levels, and I've seen success at all four of those levels in terms of what they wanted to accomplish in their communities and the type of effort they put into it. So I recommended that to the Housing Task Force, and I encourage them to look into each option as best they can and decide what their next steps may be. And that's my presentation. Again, much more information in the executive summary. I encourage you to read those. Feel free to reach out to me if you have questions on that. And again, I appreciate Michael and Rachel's assistance and the Housing Task Force's assistance as well. If we have any time left, I'd be happy to answer any specifics you have.
Your time is our time, sir. I just have one question, and I'm not sure if it's in the summary that I didn't completely go through yet, but does your research identify the number of homes that are unoccupied that are not on the market?
To a certain degree, yes. That is a statistic the Census Bureau collects every year. There's occupied and then unoccupied homes That should be one of the tables in the study.
Okay.
So,
Nothing like struck you though? I mean, I'll find it eventually.
no, I'm used to Northern Michigan having a lot more of unoccupied structures, which are typically hunting cabins, vacation homes, cottages, so on and so forth. You see that much more in Northern Michigan as compared to where I'm from, but I didn't see anything totally unusual from that standpoint. The one thing I did see on that line, and I've kind of touched that a little bit in the study, is the removal of potential rental housing and single-family home ownership opportunities and converting them to short-term rentals, and removing them from the marketplace and converting that to a VRBO type situation. That is not what I would call a problem today, but I encourage you to think in the future, how do you want to address those kind of things in terms of, do we want this segment of our housing stock to be permanently short-term rental to the detriment of someone trying to find a permanent home? So that's in the analysis as well.
Topic is on our priority list.
Yeah, and many communities are dealing with this right now.
Sure.
Some are much more further along and struggling with that issue.
Very good. I appreciate it. I don't have any other questions, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Kelly, appreciate it. Mike's got his work cut out for him. All right. We will, I'll entertain a motion to receive and file that as well.
I move we receive and file the housing needs assessment. Second.
Councilmember Walchuk,
Yes.
Mayor Waligora,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell,
Yes.
and Councilmember Noah.
Yes.
Great.
All right, thank you.
Your name for a minute there.
This, the Target Alpena report. Mike Mahler is here, Director of Economic Development from the Chamber.
Love it when a plan comes together, huh? Housing needs assessment and then Mike's turn. Perfect. Dovetails well, obviously, into the work that, that I'm in the middle of here. So once again, thank you. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. It seems like it was just a month ago that I was up here. Can't believe it was 6 months ago that I did this. Where does it go? So I'm not going to read the report to you. I'm just going to touch on a couple things that I think are worth mentioning. And of course, at the end, if you have questions, you're free to fire away at me. So first thing I'm going to talk about is MEDC RAP 2.0. Michigan Economic Development Corporation had a revitalization and placemaking program they introduced a year ago, which we used to secure a grant for the former Habitat site, which nothing has happened since we got that grant, but I'll talk about that here shortly. But this year, we also, because the program was available, we decided that we're going to look at a regional grant application. And as it turns out, we had 3 projects between Presque Isle and Alpena County that we brought together for this grant. They earmarked $6 million for this 11 county region here. And so I asked for all 6 million of it, 4.2 million of it for a project here in Alpena, and then the balance of it, 1.8 and 2 projects in Presque Isle County. So I'll talk a little bit about that here in a moment, but I do understand now that deadline's come and gone. We got our application in. I think we have a very good application, of course, but I'm biased. There's 4 applications submitted across the 11 counties. So we're one of 4. And I hope that they worked as hard as we did. Well, I'll tell you, because I think we've got some really good projects to work on. So jumping then into the DDA, of course, there's several things that we're working on here, one of which is the boundary expansion, which I know you're all well aware of and appreciate your patience on that. I'll touch on that momentarily. The APC site. So the $4.2 million that we're pursuing an application for is for a project on the APC site. As you know, a year ago, Marriott said the math doesn't work in this environment with material costs being what they are and construction costs being what they are. So they left and some other developer came forward. Actually, several developers came forward, interestingly enough, and we had meetings with several of them. And this one was the most active with respect to pursuing that property. And so they came up here in May. They brought the principals. They brought their architect with them, and we organized meetings with Rachel, Montiel, Steve Schultz. and made it worth their visit up here. One of the partners is from Florida, so he came up and was serious about this. And so, long story short, I said to you I had included a rendering for your viewing pleasure, and I didn't attach it, so shame on me. Anyway, so it is really cool. So it's a 4-story project on the river, 66 market rate apartments, studios to 2-bedroom, lower level commercial space, restaurant, a gym, a public available gym, but also be used by building tenants. And then a rooftop terrace for the building occupants, balconies on the riverside. It'd be a great project if it could come together here. And so I'm really excited. I will promise I will email to Rachel the rendering so she can share it with all of you in the next day or so you can see. Of course, the stuff I'm sharing with you is subject to change, right? They did the preliminary engineering, you looked at geotech studies, a lot of stuff to support a building like that. But this is what their thinking is today. They typically like to build stuff a lot bigger than that, but given the footprint and the complexity of that site and its proximity to the water and the water tables being so high, and trying to figure out where you put parking, what they came away with was a footprint that would accommodate 66 apartments and 66 parking spaces underneath it. So that's the update on it. We've got an Eagle grant and an Eagle loan still sitting out there available to help support this project. We included them as part of the capital formation to make this project happen. And you're talking about a $20 million project. I mean, this is a very expensive undertaking to make this thing go. So again, I will remain hopeful. The developer has a purchase agreement or an option agreement in place with Target because we own that site. They have an option agreement in place. And so if they get this RAP grant, I suspect they're going to move from an option agreement to a purchase agreement, acquire the property, take advantage of the Eagle grant and probably get started. So the timing with respect to the grant application is sometime this fall. Last year they told me we'd know in late summer, and that bled into October. And so they're saying now it's going to be, early fall. So we should know something, I'm going to say, by October about whether or not we're successful in that grant or not. Federal building was up for auction. I don't know the results of it. I don't know if anybody else here has heard anything. I see. It did sell. Okay, so it sold. I don't know who bought it, and I'm sure that over the next few weeks, hopefully whoever bought it will reach out to me and say, hey, I'm the new owner, or will be the new owner, and this is what I want to do, and how can you help me? But it's good to know that at least it's sold, though. Boundary expansion, I know you guys are all very familiar with what's happening with it. So I appreciate your patience. We're still working through to try to find a solution that's suitable for all parties involved here. And so again, I appreciate your patience, and the sooner we can put that to rest, the better. It's been a long drawn out process, and hopefully we'll know something here in the next few weeks. Former habitat site. So as I mentioned earlier, the former habitat site, we applied for a grant to put a 2-story building on that site. I talked about it last year. I brought you even renderings for that one. Pretty cool looking project. It's got 16 apartments. Some of those will be, I won't say rent controlled, but they're going to set rent limits at 100% of local AMI, and some will be market rate. So again, it'll be kind of a balance of both, but 16 apartments on the 2nd story, lower level commercial. The reason that project hasn't moved forward is they were really trying to find an anchor tenant before they spent the money to build that. They really wanted to have it locked down that they had somebody in the lower level. And so I was able to introduce somebody. I understood it. We wanted to bring their organization Alpena, put them together a couple months ago, and they've had a lot of great meetings. This particular entity is a state-funded organization, and their funding was approved in the most recent budget. And so now they've met with the developer multiple times. They're talking about taking the entire lower level of that building, which is about 20,000 square feet. So MEDC is aware of it. It doesn't change the grant. The grant request assumed multiple tenants on the lower level, daycare, some other things. MEDC doesn't care that it may be a single tenant. So anyway, I don't want to say too much here, except that they're coming to town. The CEO of that tenant organization is coming to town and meeting with him Friday, myself, and they're very serious. Once they say go, they got to be in by next December. So you'll see a lot of activity over there. It'll happen quickly because they got to build a 40,000 square foot building and ready to be occupied by next December. So I'm hopeful that they'll strike a deal and move forward here, bring another 16 apartments to our downtown. And then the Vaughan building, just last thing I'll touch on it, Jeff Konchak, now that the Sanctuary Cinema's finished, he's reached out to me and said, really want to used Target's help to help me get some, support for this project here. And he wants to add 8 apartments on the second story of that building. So if you aggregate 66, 16, and 8, that's 90. Kelly just told you we need 100. I'd like to see them downtown. There's 90 of them potentially right there. So that'd be wonderful if all these things come together here. With respect to the city property north of town, Fish and Wildlife, I know this saga has been going on for a couple of years here. What I can tell you is that one of the developers that you had a purchase agreement with has not been selected. So they've fallen by the wayside. So you now have 2 developers left pursuing 2 different properties over there for the lease for Fish and Wildlife. I don't know what the timing is, except they're telling me that this winter they're going to know which of those 2 developers got the nod. One of the developers had options for 2 parcels, one on US 23 and the other one at the end of North Industrial Highway. Fish and Wildlife said they weren't interested in the US 23 properties. They'd rather be back on North Industrial Highway. So that purchase agreement that you had approved has since been withdrawn. So 2 developers, 2 parcels. Nathan at the boathouse does not really, he's kind of set aside his plans right now, and he bought the property from the city here last year, and he's just been really busy running the boathouse right now to focus on the other element to what he wanted to do. So he's not sure what the timing will be for it. I know the city has put in a temporary road. Just kind of jumping ahead here. Finally, Aldi. It's been an ongoing project since I started here, 40 months ago in this role. Aldi bought the property 2 days ago. So maybe we're going to get an Aldi here after all. And it's right across from the Hampton Inn, across from that same street that goes back to Omega Electric, other side of so same side of the road as Hampton would be where the Aldi would go. So Marshalls, get ready to hire, I guess. They got some ads out there for hiring now. So glad to see that's coming along here quickly. And then CRTC is going to have a groundbreaking this fall for the new 5th generation hangar. They're going to get that project underway here this fall and built through the winter. And then just kind of touching to other matters here, grant pursuit. So your involvement with Target was changed a little bit, adding a level of grant support on behalf of the city and of course regionally. And so to that end, Target has assisted the city with 2 grant applications, one for the Hocaligan Plaza, one for the Marina. And I know we're still waiting on the outcomes for both of those. But Target has also written a whole bunch of other grants for a lot of different elements that would support this area, including also projects internally that we could work on through Target. So the next item is housing. So the person we brought in the right grants also has been tasked with the housing stuff. And so one of the things that Kelly pointed out here when he laid out his recommendations was there's some opportunities here to form some partnerships and control our destiny. So to that end, Target has applied to be the Region E lead for 11 counties to help MSHDA with this new housing, regional housing plan. And so with Rachel's support, we threw our hat in the ring and we were selected. So now we have a seat at the table. So it allows us to have a much more proactive approach to having a voice in what the programming is and what it looks like as the state is forming this right now, because they don't know. That's why they've reached out to entities like us and said, we need help. We can't just paint everything with the same broad brush. So anyway, Target is involved in that. Lenny's taking the lead on that piece. And so more to come on that in future updates. And then I guess I am going to pretty much stop talking from there. Just to say in closing, I still see potential opportunities to help improve our region through additional resources. And so there's things that, we Target's working on internally to bring more to the table to kind of help facilitate the things that are going on. We've got great momentum. I just don't want to lose the momentum we've got. I think the more momentum we've got, the more eyes in the community, the more opportunities that are created through those eyes in the community. I just want to see us in a position to take advantage of them. And so to that end, that's what I'm focused on. And okay, enough of the details. I will ask you if you have any questions or anything you'd like to share. I can answer.
Getting a rendering of that.
You will? I'll send it to Rachel today. Whether she sends it to you tonight or not when you get home, but I apologize. I meant to include it in your packet here.
I double checked it out.
Yeah, I apologize. It is a really cool looking building though. What was really nice is the architect who was here was looking at the federal building. He just kept staring at that and he says, whatever we do here has got to fit with that. It's got to look like they're, complementary, which that's stuff I'd want to hear, right? I don't want to see some albatross. Not that an architect would, create an albatross and set it in the middle of our downtown and we'd all love it. But the fact that he was really staring at the buildings surrounding that site, trying to figure out how to integrate that look, the corbels and things like that into this project, I thought was, it was exciting. So, questions? I know I'm the only thing between dinner and you guys is me. So thanks for your time. I do appreciate your support of what we're trying to do here. I really do. So thank you all.
Mike, appreciate it.
Oh,
I was going to say, that seems to be the theme. Wanna make- All right, and entertain a motion to receive and file that as well.
I move we receive and file the Target Alpena report.
Mayor Waligora.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell.
Yes.
Councilmember Nowak.
Yes.
And Councilmember Walczak.
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right, thank you. Next up, report of officers, fourth quarter fiscal year 2023 report. Anna Soik, the financial director, is here.
We'll probably not be getting applause for this because it's not as exciting as Okay, thanks. Okay, so this is at June 30, 2023, so the end of our last fiscal year, and we should be at 100% budget. Please keep in mind that this is incredibly preliminary. There's so many things that have yet to happen. There are accruals that need to happen. We accrue back anything that we receive until the end of August. If it's over $1,000 in expense, we move it back. And any revenue that would pertain to the previous fiscal year as well. Going through the functions, general government is at 94%. The August 23 revenue sharing payment will be accrued back, and this will be that will put us beyond 100% received. Public safety is at 86%. The accrual for ambulance transport fees has not been entered yet, but that should get it closer to the amended budget. Public Works is over budget, 115%. We sold a lot of compost and burials and sales of cemetery lots. So those were all higher than projected. Community and Economic Development is at 112%. Zoning fee revenue was higher than projected. Recreation and Culture is only at 2.96% of budget. And this is because the majority of the revenue, $319,600, was anticipated for grants, none of which has been received. There's still a chance that we could, and we would accrue it back. Transfers in is at 33%. A transfer of $33,660 from the equipment fund to the general fund was missed and will be corrected. So overall, for total revenue, we originally projected to receive 11.31 million. We amended that to 11.30. So far, we have received 10.2 million, which makes it 90% of budget received. And actual year-to-date at June 30, 22 was at 10.6. So we are 480,000 less than last year. Any questions on the revenue section? Okay, on to the expenditures. General government is still under budget, but that could change with accruals from the last payroll. So the first payroll that happened in July, 40% of that is going to get moved back to fiscal year 23. So these numbers are going to increase. Public safety is at 93% of budget. Public Works is at 82%. That's kind of low due to capital projects that haven't been expensed yet. Health and welfare, that was just, that's the payment to the Humane Society, and that was 100%. So that's good. Community and Economic Development is only at 74%. $48,000 was budgeted for a demolition on a blighted property, but that isn't going to happen until I think later this month. And we are going to make that correction. There'll be a carryover request for the next meeting. Recreation and Culture is at 61% of budget. $300,000 was budgeted for the restrooms at Bayview, but only $28,600 has been expensed for the design services portion of that project. Transfers out is at 116% of budget, and it's over because there was an unanticipated transfer needed to the stores fund of $44,413. So that's a fund, well, the funds can't be negative in cash, so we had to make that transfer. Total expenditures that were originally approved were at 11.9 million. We amended that down to 11.4 million. Our current actual year-to-date expenditures are at 10.3 million, which is 90% of the budget used, and we're about $200,000 higher than last year at that point. So we had originally anticipated to take $608,362 from fund balance. We amended that to only taking $129,647, and so far we're sitting at negative $152,000. So that's pretty good, and a lot of that has to do with that personal property tax reimbursement that we don't budget for. So, but that number will change. I don't know how much. Just depends on what we get in the next 2 months. But we are on track to hopefully use a little bit of fund balance. But that's okay. We've got, as you know, a large reduction for next year plan. So if we add to it, then that'll just be more that we have for next year. Any questions on that section? Okay. Next slide, please. This one is the cash balances and investments. The budget stabilization fund, we added a $5,000 budget appropriation. So that's why that one went up. The major and local streets, those look okay to me. The marina is doing good. The tree park improvement fund is dwindled down. That's because we're intentionally using up those funds for tree planting projects within the city. Brownfield Redevelopment Authority is decreased. That was because of the $10,000 that we transferred to the general fund for admin expenses. The DDA number 2 was merged into, or I'm sorry, the DDA number 2, the number 5 was merged into number 2. So that's why there's a 0 fund balance there. Building authority debt is dwindling, and that's because we're trying to use that up instead of transferring from the general fund. Water fund is a large increase as compared to last year, and that's because we received $3 million for the Clearwell project. The general custodial fund is a fund that fluctuates based on what we're holding for others. Basically, it's a trust fund. So, I mean, it's a lot less, but there's still a lot of money in there. The general fund is the fund balance, the cash balance is higher as compared to last year. And that's because we've collected more taxes as compared to last year since the taxable values increased, and we'll probably see this again since they increased again this year. Fund balance has increased, and we're able to invest more idle cash. The American Rescue Plan Act fund is dwindling a little bit because we're using it. And we have until the end of calendar year 24. Yeah, to use up those funds. Cemetery Trust currently has negative cash, but that will be resolved with an adjusting entry. The equipment fund balance is high, or cash balance. I keep saying fund balance, but it's cash and investments balance. We've only spent 57.8% of budgeted expenditures, and there may be more accruals. The retirement fund, we are at 23.4 million as compared to 24.8 a year ago. These amounts are book values. We were the market value increased from 27.1 million on March 31st to 27.4 million on June 30th. The retiree healthcare fund is at just over 2 million as compared to 1.9 a year ago. The market value increased from 2.17 million on March 31st to 2.21 million on June 30th. Any questions on that page? Okay. And the last one is the list of investments by fund. I just wanted to point out here that we were able to invest 250,000 more of ARPA funds. We invested it short term. It's just 6 months because we did not see an immediate need for those funds. Any of these smaller things that we're using the funds for, we're just using general fund cash, but it gets replaced with this once these mature. So because the rates, I mean, they're really good right now. They're over 5%. So we figured we'd take advantage of that. Our average rate of return for the previous quarter was 2.76%, and we are now at 3.32%. So we had in the DPW construction fund, we had a government bond that was only earning 0.31%, and that was a 3-year term on that. So we swapped that out and got a 4.7% for 7 years. So that's pretty good. And I also just wanted to point out that in the general fund, we've earned almost $100,000 more than last year and in interest income. And we have more that is yet to be accrued. So it'll be a little bit more than that. Yep. So that is also helping with that fund balance. Any questions on anything?
Total control. God. I'll entertain a motion to receive and file that.
I move we receive and file the fourth quarter fiscal year 2023 report.
Second.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell?
Yes.
Councilmember Nowak?
Yes.
Councilmember Walchuk?
Yes.
Mayor Waligora?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Next up is new business, water recycling plant SCADA installation. Steve Schultz, the city engineer, is here.
All right. On July 10th, 2023, the city received and opened proposals for the design, engineering, purchase, and installation of supervisory control and data acquisition related upgrades to the city of Alpena water recycling plant, so SCADA. The intent of a SCADA system is to automate controlling and monitor the plant's operations into one centralized point as opposed to physically operating each individual process or monitor. Bid documents were sent to 19 firms and posted on the city's website with 3 bids received as listed below. So we've got bids from Tempest, BVP Process, and J Rank, all of which were present at the mandatory site visit meeting previously. Tempest Enterprises was present, and they completed a SCADA project for us in 2019 at the water production plant. And additionally, they have installed monitoring telemetry to the lift stations throughout the city's collection system. These systems will be a building block for the proposed recycling plant system and will provide an integrated system across both locations and the collection and distribution systems. This will provide the city with the ability to run either plant from the opposing location if the need were ever to arise. The city has adequate funding between $180,000 to be carried over from fiscal year 22-23 and $185,000 in the current budget for the SCADA installation project. Upon review of the bids and the recommendation of water recycling plant personnel, it is my recommendation as city engineer that city council award the water recycling plant SCADA installation to Tempest Enterprises in the amount of $362,344.17. 17 cents. I don't know.
I don't,
Yeah.
Ever seen a spread like that?
Yeah, Tempest has been involved with us for quite some time.
I assume.
So they know our plants like the back of their hand. And a lot of the suggestions, a lot of what we've been doing has come from them. And, it's too big of a project to just hand to somebody. It's too big of a project to add to another project. We've considered a whole bunch of other things, but so we ended up just doing a proposal and bid it out there. And these other two companies, they certainly have the means and everything, but they don't know the system like Tempest does. They might even bring different software into the fold or different ways of doing things that might have to change the way we do things at the other plants, and things like that. So I think Tempest has just been ingrained enough in the system as it is now to be able to do it for this price.
Okay. Awesome. Good for us. I don't have any questions.
I don't have any questions.
No questions. I move we award the water plant SCADA installation to Tempest Enterprises in the amount of $362,344.17.
Thank you.
Councilmember Mitchell,
Yes.
Councilmember Nowak,
Yes.
Councilmember Walchuk,
Yes.
Mayor Waligora,
Aye.
and Mayor Pro Tem Johnson. Motion carries.
Thank you, Steve.
Now, if I don't get a round of applause for this, I move we adjourn to closed session to discuss collective bargaining agreement for police command and patrol units.
Support.
Councilmember Nowak,
Yes.
Councilmember Walchuk,
Yes.
Mayor Waligora,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Awesome.
This conference will now be recorded.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the contract for police patrol as presented.
Second.
Councilmember Walchuk,
Yes.
Mayor Waligora,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell,
Yes.
Councilmember Nowak.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Third.
Very good. You got the third.